Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Shuckburgh, and we're exploring the wonderful region of the Cotswolds in southwest England. We've decided to revisit the centre of the region and find some hidden gems, places that are not quite so famous, but still just as beautiful. Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Shuckburgh. Today you find Ross, Widget, Gizmo and me in the little village of Long Compton. This is a beautiful classic Cotswold village. One of the features, as with so many villages with the word long at the beginning of their name, is that it's on a main road that stretches the village right through and makes rather a lot of noise. You'll find quite a fair bit of traffic here. The village has some rather exciting witchcraft associations, and I'm really looking forward to telling you those stories. So come with me and I'll show you around. Stretching around 3/4 of a mile along the A3400, the road that runs between Shipton on Stour and Chipping Norton, Long Compton is an ancient village. There are signs of Roman and even earlier remains locally, but it was in Saxon times that the village was founded, originally just west of today's church, in the field in which the bumps and dips in the ground betrayed the historical presence of buildings. Much repeated local legend tells us that St. Augustine, the patron saint of brewers, printers and theologians, whose thoughts profoundly influenced the medieval worldview and whose writings were one of the theological foundations of the Protestant Reformation, visited Long Compton in the 6th century. I'd always thought he died in 430, so how reliable the legend is I'll leave to you to decide. Our last visit here was from a distance. Some of you may remember we told the story of the Rollright Stones, ancient monuments on the hill above Long Compton. There, it is told, a marauding king and his soldiers were turned to stone by a witch who tricked the king into thinking he was closer to Long Compton than he actually was. Witchcraft seems to have been something of an obsession for the villagers of Long Compton. It was said there are enough witches in Long Compton to draw a load of hay up Long Compton Hill. We're not quite sure how many witches that means they had, but in one case at least, this obsession led to a tragic and violent event. One evening in September 1875, an unfortunate 79-year-old woman called Anne Tennant was walking home with her husband John when she was spotted by a 44-year-old local farm worker called James Hayward. Hayward had had a lousy day, working alone in the fields, and was in a very bad mood. He was mulling over the message his parents had drummed into his head since childhood, that any sort of misfortune in his life was the fault not of his obvious lack of life skills, but of witchcraft. Spotting old Mrs. Tennant, without warning, he attacked her, stabbing her in the legs and arms with his pitchfork and beating her over the head with its handle. Her screams were overheard by a local farmer who came to her rescue, holding Hayward down until the local constable arrived with a doctor. Sadly, Anne Tennant died before the doctor could work his magic. At Hayward's trial, it was reported that the prisoner entertained most astounding delusions and superstitions respecting witches and witchcraft, which had haunted him for years, impelling him to murder the deceased. Hayward was taken to prison in Shipton on Stour, where he showed no sign of remorse. He said, "I hope she's dead. She was an old witch. There are 15 more in the village. I'll serve the same. I mean to kill 'em all." James was found to be not guilty by reason of insanity and was ordered to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. Anne Tennant is buried in the Long Compton churchyard. The beautiful thatched lich gate through which you enter said churchyard dates from the early 17th century, and until around 1920 was part of a row of cottages. The village went through a very difficult time during the decline in agriculture in the early 20th century, when many of the village cottages went to rack and ruin. This little remnant of those times was restored and given to the church in 1964. The church of St. Peter and St. Paul is itself largely 13th century and amply rewards the efforts of the visitor. Early in the 14th century, the north aisle was added and a considerable restoration took place. The south porch, through which you enter, is probably late 14th century and contains a 14th century tomb with a very badly worn effigy of a lady. You can see traces of the reticulated side hair coiffure and flat cap of the early 15th century on the head that rests on a cushion. Her dress appears to have been a close-fitting bodice and loose flowing skirt, and her hands were in prayer on her breast, with her feet resting on a dog. Above the figure are the remnants of a canopy. Once inside the church, you're immediately aware of extremely recent alterations to the west end of the church, providing a new meeting room and domestic facilities which, after an initial gulp from an old traditionalist like me, clearly demonstrates a welcome commitment to the future of the church. The furniture in the church, including the font, is all modern. Not as modern as the West End, but not ancient. The pulpit is 19th century, using panels from an earlier 15th century font. The east window over the altar is dating 1862, but set in a 14th century frame. And the chancel carpet was made in 1959 by local village ladies. As your eyes are drawn upwards to the light from the spectacular clerestory raised in the 15th century, you'll notice the carved corbels supporting the trusses of the new roof. They are numerous and detailed, and at the risk of getting a crick in your neck, well worth a careful look. The overall impression is of a busy and much-loved parish church, with lots to please the spirit. There's just one thing, for me, that's difficult to come to terms with. A clumsy wooden cabinet, hexagonal in shape, built in 2004 to commemorate a late church warden, has been placed randomly by the font, destroying any sense of proportion to the space around it. When I saw it, I assumed it was on wheels so that you could move it out of the way, but no, it seems to be fixed to the floor. A sad and quite unnecessary error, which, for me, tips the modern alterations over the line from acceptable to worrying. Hey, but that's just me. Wandering out of the church and down the road a bit, going south, you'll see the old rectory on the left, an interesting building, shows the style in which the clerics of old used to live, and on the right the village shop, busy and obviously an essential component of this successful community. Otherwise, the village is made up of a collection of old and new cottages of the Cotswold type that overall make a classic and beautiful settlement. I hope you've enjoyed our little trip around Long Compton. It's amazing what's happened here in the past, and it's really quite spooky thinking of what's taken place. We've enjoyed ourselves. The church is lovely. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can find us on all the normal platforms. Find our website where you'll find all the stuff that we've done in the past. And we look forward to seeing you very soon somewhere else in the Cotswolds.